Hey everyone, welcome to Poly Psychology. I hope you all are doing good. So, with this video, I will be starting a course in which I'll be teaching the psychology book by Robert Barron and Misra. So, I hope that you are aware about this book because many students they had requested me in my personal DM and in the channel as well that they want a series where they can refer the videos in order to prepare for their competitive exams or NET exams. So this book which I will be teaching, through which I'll be making my slides and I'll be explaining the topics from, is a very nice book which you can refer and through which you can prepare for your college exams, NET exams, competitive exams. So I hope that you all like this course, and I'll be making the videos part wise. For example, if this is the first chapter and this video is the first part of the first chapter, so for that you need to subscribe to my channel so that whenever I'll upload a new video, you will get the notification if you click on the bell icon below. So right now I'd like to tell you all to go and subscribe to my channel. It hardly takes a few seconds, and then you'll be like benefiting from my channel. So now that you have already subscribed, I hope that you have already subscribed to my channel. I'd like to tell you all that in this entire course I'll mostly try to speak in English, and if any of you find difficulty with the explanation part, you can drop a comment in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to explain all those topics which you couldn't understand or clear all your doubts. And okay, so with this I would like to start the course. Let's look at slide 1. Now this is the first chapter of Psychology, Indian Subcontinent Edition book by Robert Barron and Misra. And the first chapter's name is Psychology, a Science and a Perspective. We will be understanding that what psychology is all about. If you follow this course entirely, in which I'll be explaining this book by Robert Barron and Misra, you will gain an insight about what psychology is all about. Because many of you who are not from psychology background, they find psychology to be interesting, and there are other group who says that psychology is not actually a subject, it is all about common sense, where we can easily predict what the other person is going through, and we can make our own inferences, but that is not true. So as you will study about all these concepts and how psychology emerged, and how it is nowadays it is perceived to be, it is studied, how it is studied, how the psychologists, how the behavior scientists, they apply all the theories into the real life situations. About all those things we are going to study in this chapter and in this course entirely. So make sure that you watch all the videos and try to gain knowledge as much as possible. The first topic here is, what is modern psychology? If I'll ask you a very common question, like it is, if I'll ask you what is psychology, you may be from psychology background or you may not be from a psychology background. So if you have already studied what psychology is all about, if you know its definition, then you'll be very easily answering to my question, and most probably you'll say that it is the study of mental processes, it is the study of behavior and experiences in different contexts. But what about those who are not from psychology background? They may form different answers. Now, many of them, they have got this misconception that psychology is mostly about hypnotism, where the therapist is sitting in front of the client and he or she is trying to hypnotize the person, and then they are able to tell all those things which they are unaware of. Many of you And there are many people who think that psychology is all about hypnotism, psychology is all about past life regression, or psychology, the study of psychology, and the persons who visit the psychologist, they are like mad people. They might be suffering from mental illness and only then they visit the counselor or the psychologist. But this is not true. This is partially true, but this is not absolutely true. So, psychology is best defined as the science of behavior and cognitive processes. Now, it is a very important term here which has been used, and that term is the science. We should be able to notice this thing, that when we define psychology, we have used the term science. That means it is an actual discipline, and it is not common sense how the most of the population, how they perceive psychology to be. It is not like that. Psychology is a science. It is absolutely a science where the behavior and cognitive processes are studied. It is studied by the behavior scientist, by the psychologist. They infer the results and then they try to apply those results in our real life, daily life situations. So, by behavior, what do we mean? Behavior is any observable action or reaction of a living organism, and it is mostly overt in nature. So, when I'm saying that it is mostly overt in nature, I mean that behavior is something which can be seen through our eyes, which can be directly noticed, any observable action or reaction. When you are trying to give a gift to your best friend, when you are like giving the gift or giving a chocolate to your best friend, what the person does, what the person in front of you, he or she will do, they'll just take that gift from you with of course with a reaction of happiness or surprise, or like they'll be surprised to say that how could you give such gift. Maybe it could be on their birthday, or just like that you want to appreciate them for their work, for their anything. It could be like you want to gift them. So what do you see? They'll take that gift from you, and you notice the overt behavior, you notice the overt reaction, but you cannot say that what that person might be feeling from inside. Now many a times it happens that we try to portray that we are happy from outside, but actually we are preoccupied with many problems, like it can happen from like family problems or career problems. There are many, but still people try to be happy from outside. So that's why it has been told that it is a science of behavior. We are not just predicting things, we are constantly studying things, we are constantly defining things. That's why psychology is a science. So behavior, when we are using this term, it is like it should be observable action or reaction of a living organism. And next, we are not just relying entirely on behavior, that so that I mean, like if I'll rely entirely on the behavior, I'll say that the person is entirely happy. But what about the cognitive processes? What about the mental processes which the person's inside mind is doing? So also it is included that psychology is best defined as the science of behavior and cognitive processes. So next we need to understand about cognitive processes. So as you can see, cognitive processes, it is every aspect of our mental life or the workings of the human mind. So human mind, what it does, cognitive processes are like, it is our thoughts, what we think. We are constantly thinking, even if we are asleep. There are so many thoughts which is going inside our mind, and that's why our mind can never rest. So cognitive processes, it is continuous in nature. We are thinking, we are trying to memorize something, we are making memories. How do we remember what happened to us 5 years back? It is stored in our memory. So all these are cognitive processes, mental images, reasoning, decision making, problem solving, etc. Next is Psychology encompasses a vast range of phenomena at various levels. This thing is to be noted. For example, individual, group, community, culture, and in the different domains. So, psychology studies a single phenomena at various levels, at individual level, group level, community level, and as well as it takes into account the role of culture. So, culture is a very important thing, and as we proceed, we'll get to know that culture is so important that it has got its own importance in the socio-cultural context. We try to define every phenomena in the socio-cultural context. And so psychology is not just a study that's like it's not just a science on its own, so that you will just study and you are not able to apply it on your real life. It's not like that. If you're studying psychology, you'll you'll benefit from it in your own life, and you can also help others. So psychology is a really very nice subject, and by studying psychology, students can also gain insights into facilitating their own knowledge. They'll acquire knowledge and skills, and when they are acquiring this knowledge and skills, it is also helping them for their own personal growth. And that's why I said that it is very much relevant to everyday life, because it is not entirely common sense. It may be some parts may be like common sense. When we are observing a person's behavior, we can say that any person can do that, but when the behavior is being observed by an expert, all those things which the expert will observe, a normal person may ignore such things. So that is why we say that psychology may be a little bit of common sense, but it is not at all entirely common sense, and it is purely a science, it is purely a knowledge discipline. Okay, so now let's move on to the next slide. The next topic is psychology's parents, philosophy and physiology, the origin of psychology. So basically, it says that how psychology originated. Let me tell you in a very simple way that physiology, the subject of philosophy, and the subject of physiology, both of them, they have contributed a lot to the subject of psychology. Psychology had gradually emerged over the course of the 19th century, but it may be recalled that the modern Western science is often thought to have its origins in the 16th century Renaissance. Most of us, we think that the modern Western science, where there were rigorous experiments and the scientists were constantly working on the different disciplines, all those things, it happened during the origins in the 16th century Renaissance, when people were like enlightened with knowledge. The period of Renaissance is all about enlightenment and the age of age of knowledge and age of enlightenment in the people, when they were exposed to many new things, like many new knowledge disciplines and many new art forms emerged during that period. But the seeds of scientific thought, however, are traceable to the Hellenic, Chinese, Indian, and Arabic civilizations. So these civilizations, they came much before the Renaissance period, but still they had this scientific thought thing in their minds. They had those seeds, but they were not able to express properly. And what happened is that when these Western scientists, they worked and they constantly did research on these topics, they could produce a lot of work and a lot of experiments about it, and that's why it got famous. That's why all these subjects, they became famous, because they were made famous during that period. So by the late 19th century, many philosophers had turned their attentions to questions about the human mind. And what were the questions like? The first question could be, how do we perceive the world around us? All these people who talked about the human mind, which is like the main subject or the main content of the study of psychology, the human mind, it was first, it was very much introduced by these philosophers only. when they questioned that how do we perceive the world around us? Do people have free will, or are their actions determined by events outside and inside their bodies? I mean, whatever we do, who is the reason? Am I the reason? Is my own thought is the reason, or my own thoughts, or it could be my environment, it could be another person influencing me, and that's why I'm behaving in a particular way. So how to answer all these questions, and what is the link between the mind and body, between the physical world and our thoughts, feelings, consciousness? What is the connection between them? How do we connect? How the mind, body, and the soul is connected, and how it is balanced? Who will answer all these questions? Philosophers had long attempted to answer these questions through careful reasoning, and that careful reasoning is nothing but rationalism. They tried to rationalize their thoughts. For example, Rene Descartes, he was a French philosopher who gave the view of dualism. And in his view of dualism, he said that mind and body are distinct entities interacting through the pineal gland. So, Rene could say that the mind and the body, both of them, they are different from each other, they are distinct from each other, but they interact together. And where do they join? They intersect through the pineal gland. I mean, they connect with each other through the pineal gland, which is found deep within the brain. And when they connect with each other, the mind and body, through the pineal gland, which is situated deep inside our brain, all our actions and behavior could be determined. And for that reason, all our behavior and actions are also influenced. Next was other philosophers. They gave a view of interactionism. Now, what is this? They said that mind and body, they influence each other. Supposing there is a thought in my mind, and that thought is influencing my body, or it could be something is not normal with my body, and that's why that is influencing my mind, because I'm not able to coordinate both of them. So this view is basically known as interactionism, where both the mind and the body should influence each other. By the end of 19th century, philosophers, they wanted to carefully observe the human mind, which is more than reasoning. Now, did you understand this question? Let me repeat it again. It says, by the end of 19th century, the philosophers wanted to carefully observe the human mind, which is more than reasoning. So how could such observations be made? Now is the time to observe the human mind and not just the thoughts. So the philosophers, they wanted to observe this human mind, and they did not just want to talk about it, they wanted to observe it. So the next question which arose was, how could such observations be made? So the question that how could such observations be made about the human mind, which is more than reasoning, gave rise to an empirical approach to study the human mind. And this is where physiology entered the picture. When I'm talking about the practical study of human mind, of course, I cannot do it without the knowledge of physiology, where we are directly observing. We are able to observe what is happening inside our brain, inside our mind. So Johannes Muller described how electrical signals were conducted by nerves within the body. So he tried to study physiology, and he tried to describe how the electrical signals were conducted by the nerves within the body, and the information was transferred from the outward stimulus to our brain, and then we took any action, or then we just gave the response to the stimulus. So it was described by Johannes Muller. Next, Hermann von Helmholtz. He showed how receptors in our eyes and ears, both of them, they are sense organs, they receive and interpret sensations from the outside world. Next was Gustav Fechner. He demonstrated that our perceptions of the physical stimuli, it could be like the loudness of the sound, brightness of the light, they are related in lawful predictable ways to the physical energies of these stimuli. So all these happened during the period from 1860 to 1880, when people, they gave importance to the study of physiology, because they very much wanted to have an empirical approach in which they could have proofs about what they described, about what they gave the theories and what they explained. They wanted to give proofs with a practical approach and with an empirical approach. So they did all these observations by using the knowledge of physiology. Now, these posed a new idea of the possibility of the scientific field of psychology. Now, people said that when they are able to describe all these things, then they can also describe many phenomena about the human mind as well. When they could study about perceptions, when they could study about the sense organs and how the electrical signals were conducted by nerves within the human body, then they can surely study what happens inside the human brain, how the cognitive processes they work, and how they influence the human behavior, and how the mind body is connected. So these posed a new idea of the possibility of a scientific field of psychology. After this, people were very much impressed with the idea of giving a scientific approach to the study of psychology, and hence the development of psychology started in the 19th century Europe, where we can see a very important landmark or very important date in the history of psychology, which is 1879, in the year in which Wilhelm Wundt, he founded the first formal laboratory for research in psychology at the University of Leipzig, Germany. And for that reason, he is also known as the founder of experimental psychology, because he has also contributed a lot to the field of cultural psychology, and he had also done impressive works in other topics, in other related phenomena. That's why he is also considered as the founder of experimental psychology, because he is the founder of the first formal laboratory for research which is dedicated to the study of psychology at the University of Leipzig. Now, another psychologist, or who was philosopher then, his name has been mentioned in the book. It is Alexander Bain, who was a philosopher. He founded the influential journal which is known as Mind in the year 1876, and he had also written many books regarding psychology and its different topics. And also, he trained a large number of graduate students who followed psychology and who did great in their future work. So he also deserved he also deserved the title of founder of psychology, or the father of psychology. But still, because Wilhelm Wundt, he founded the first formal lab for research in psychology, he is considered to be the founder of experimental psychology. Now next is G. Stanley Hall. He is student of Wilhelm Wundt only. He brought psychology to the US, and he founded the first lab of psychology at Johns Hopkins in the year of 1883. Also, he helped start the American Psychological Association in the year of 1892, and then he became its first president. For this development, when the subject of psychology was popularized in the US by G. Stanley Hall, it soon happened that by the year of 1893, there were 24 US universities who had established their own lab of psychology. Now, even though the subject of psychology was being popularized in the Europe, in the USA, but still all was not smooth sailing for the new field, however. In fact, it was soon rocked to its foundations by heated controversies concerning its focus, what exactly it should study. The emergence of modern psychology was greatly facilitated by the ideas of evolutionism and individualism. So, when I talked about all those developments and how it became a separate knowledge discipline from philosophy and physiology, it was not at all very easy for psychology to emerge on its own because there were early battles over what psychology should study. Wilhelm Wundt proposed that psychology should focus on analyzing the contents of consciousness in order to determine its basic elements and relationships between them, a view which is known as structuralism. So, what did Wilhelm Wundt, the founder of experimental psychology, said? That psychology is a subject that should focus on analyzing a person's contents of the consciousness. I mean, all those cognitive processes, all those mental activities, mental processes which lies in our consciousness, that should be analyzed. The contents of the consciousness should be analyzed in order to determine its basic elements. We need to find the basic elements. I mean, what are the basic elements of which it is composed of, and what is the relationship between them, a view which is known as structuralism. So remember, Wilhelm Wundt's psychology is known by the name of structuralism. His view is structuralism because he focused on the basic elements or the contents of the consciousness of our mind and how they are related to each other. He used a method known as introspection, in which the individuals were trained to report in detail on their conscious experiences in response to specific stimuli presented under carefully controlled conditions. So, when I said that Wundt wanted to analyze the contents, Wundt wanted to analyze the basic elements of the consciousness of a person's mind and the relationships between those elements. Now, you'll tell me that how? What is the possible way in which a person can know that what the other person's consciousness is made of? How will you know? So, for that question, to answer that question, wouldn't he just gave a method which is known as introspection? In this method, all those individuals who are under the study, they are trained to report in detail about all their conscious experiences, what they are experiencing consciously, and what do they remember, what do they think about them, and how it is related to each other, why do they feel like that exactly, and in response to specific stimuli presented under carefully controlled conditions. So all these things were taken care of, and that's how the method of introspection could be applied. So Wundt and his followers, they gave strict insistence to adapt rigorous research methods for the study, and for that reason psychology is a very much science, because Wundt, he also founded the experimental lab for psychology. He and his followers, who followed the view of structuralism for the study of psychology, they gave strict insistence to adapt rigorous research methods for the study of psychology. Now, as you know that Wilhelm Wundt, he founded the psychology lab in Leipzig at the University of Leipzig, which is in Germany. So the new scientific psychology, it developed in Germany, and many scholars and students from the US, they visited Germany and they studied at the German universities, because in order to gain the right knowledge about the study, about the knowledge discipline, and to benefit from it. Now they returned to North America because the students who visited the universities at Germany, they were from US, and they returned to North America, and they started adapting the psychological ideas to their social context. Imagine, in Germany, people, they have got their own social context, and people residing in the North America, in the US, they have their own social context. So whatever these students from the US they learned in the German universities, they wanted to adapt, they wanted to apply it to their own social context and their own real life. So when they tried to do that, this led to the hybridization. Hybridization of what? Hybridization of psychology. And that's why new scientific psychology which developed in Germany, it was hybridized by all those students who came from US and they studied in Germany and they returned to North America. And now, and for that reason, because they adapted their ideas, the ideas which they studied in their universities, they applied those ideas, they adapted those ideas in their own social context. Now the science of mind, it became the science of behavior and was applied to various fields like business, mental health. So what exactly happened when I talk about the hybridization of psychology is that, now let us try to recall that what Wilhelm Wundt said. He said that psychology should study the contents of consciousness and the basic elements and the relationships. So what we are talking about? We are talking about the human mind. When I'm referring to the consciousness, then you should be able to understand that I'm referring the human mind. So what happened is that when these students from US they studied in the Germany and they studied everything about the human mind, and now they went back to their own countries and they just wanted to adapt all those theories, they wanted to apply all those theories in their own countries. What did they notice? They found the role of social context, because in both of these countries the behavior of people, it is different. Now in India, when we see each other, we say namaste, but American people they don't. They wave at each other. So it is like it's difference in behavior. We join our hands and we say namaste, but American people they don't. They just wave or they just give you a smile, and or even they'll not give you a smile, but still it's like their acceptance, they accept that kind of behavior, we accept this kind of behavior. So there will be differences in behavior because it is socially something, it is of social context. When people are applied, when we take into account people of a particular region, we should be adding the social context to it. So that's why all the study of mind, it became the science of behavior and was applied to various fields like business and mental health. And why was it applied? So that all those human beings in these related fields, they can benefit, they can work with much more productivity, and they can influence more people for their profit, for their productivity. So that's why all these knowledge, all these science of behavior was applied to all these related fields. Now, as I've already said that Wilhelm Wundt, he focused on the basic elements and the relationships in our consciousness, in our mind. But there were many others who did not fully agree to it, and that's why these structuralisms focus on identifying the structure or elements of consciousness was soon challenged by William James and others. So William James was another psychologist who challenged the view of structuralism, and he founded his own known as the functionalism. So this view of functionalism focuses on the functions of the human mind, consciousness, and was strongly influenced by Darwin's theory of natural selection. Now, what is this? It proponents argued that since consciousness is a uniquely human characteristic, it must be, or it must serve important functions for us, otherwise it would never have evolved. With this thought in mind, James and other functionalists focused on understanding the functions of consciousness, how it helps human beings cope with the challenging and changing world around them, and that's the reason why this gave a practical slant to the research conducted by the functionalists who began to focus on topics like child development, relative benefits of various educational practices, etc. So I hope that you could understand that why William James did not entirely agree on Wundt's views about the study of psychology, because he said that it is not just the elements of the consciousness, but what the mind actually does, what the consciousness is doing to the human behavior, and how it is influenced, and how it influences our behavior. And he also said that it was strongly influenced by the theory of functionalism is strongly influenced by Darwin's theory of natural selection. And this natural selection, it says that human mind, like consciousness which is lying inside the human mind, is a uniquely human characteristic. No animal has got that consciousness. That's why we say that you are a human being and you're different from animal. So be kind to others and think before you do anything. That's why we just say all these things. We use such terms because we have got consciousness. We have got conscience in our mind. Now, how did it evolve? How did we go from ape-like creatures to the present form of human beings, present form of Homo sapiens? So he said he was agreed with this view of natural selection, that the the functions of consciousness, that how it helps human beings cope, it helps us to cope. Our consciousness which is residing in our human mind, it helps us to cope, it adapts during the challenging and changing situations, so that we can serve the situation in a best way possible. Now, research by functionalists on child development and benefits of various educational practices were also done with all these things in their mind. The main focus was on the function of mind consciousness. And since consciousness is a uniquely human characteristic, as I already said, it must be serving important functions for us. So this above view, it has received new attention in the field of evolutionary psychology, which was much earlier mentioned by William James. After the views of structuralism and functionalism, another view known as behaviorism burst upon the field in the year 1913, in a provocative article by brilliant but brash young psychologist whose name was John B. Watson. So Watson is the person, John Watson, who gave this idea of behaviorism in order to study psychology. I mean, he gave the approach of behaviorism to the knowledge of psychology. He passionately argued for the view that psychology should focus on behavior. Behavior, I already told you what behavior is all about. It is the actions that can be observed and measured, and it is mostly covert in nature. So this view, it dominated the field for several decades, and it was emphasized still further by B.F. Skinner. If you are a psychology student already, if you come from psychology background, you definitely might have come across this name, Skinner, who argued that the field should focus only on overt responses to various stimuli and ignore the internal states of mind. Now, why did he say to ignore the internal states of mind? Remember, it was much earlier. We are talking about the year of 19 and 13. Now it is 2021. So there will definitely be much gap in the forms of technology, and that's why all these psychologists who were trying to define psychology in the best way possible, they were doing a lot of research, a lot of work, and that's why they were like agreeing upon some views and rejecting some views. They were constantly trying to make psychology look much like a scientific discipline. And this is the reason why Skinner said to ignore the internal states of mind, because at that time they had not devised any method through which they could study the internal states of mind empirically. Because at that time there were no such methods or technology which could help observe the human mind, and that's why he said that we should focus only on overt responses and not on the internal states of mind. By the 1930s, psychology's early battles seemed to be over, and behaviorism in one form or another had won the day. Now you tell me why most of the people, and why this line has been written, that behaviorism in one form or another had won the day. I mean, it won because most of the people believed that we should study something which can be observed, which we can see, which we can study, which we can notice, and which we can measure. So that's why people agreed with this behaviorism. Next topic is the challenges to behaviorism and the emergence of modern psychology. All which we were studying, it talked about the overt things like the overt behavior, the human mind, the consciousness of which we are like consciously aware of. Now, when you are reading this lesson, you know that you are sitting and you are studying, you're devoting your time to the study of psychology, you're preparing for any exam, you're trying to understand all these concepts by watching my videos. You know this. But later, Sigmund Freud, he was a Viennese psychiatrist who argued that for the role of the unconscious and other internal processes in human behavior and mental disorders. Now, why did he pose challenge to behaviorism? Because he said that the internal states of mind could be studied by applying different methods. We can gain an access to the internal states of mind and not just the consciousness, we can even gain an insight into our unconscious mind of which we are not at all aware of. So, he said that most of the human behavior and most of the mental disorders which happen to human beings, the mental disorders through which human beings they suffer, are the result, and they are the result of the thoughts and the mental activities happening inside our unconscious mind of which we are totally unaware of. In the 1950s, humanistic psychologists they argued that people they have a free will and they are strongly motivated by future plans and goals and by the desire for personal growth. Now you would say that why these people they made such a statement? Because Sigmund Freud in his theory he said that the the human mind is divided into the conscious mind as well as the unconscious mind. Now, what this unconscious mind is all about, it is like it is deeply seated inside, it is like the innermost part of the human mind, which cannot be easily accessed. And he said that most of the thoughts which is inside the unconscious mind are related to sexual thoughts and aggression mainly, and aggression also of the primary or the primitive needs. It is mostly composed of the aggressive and primitive needs and desires and the sexual desires. So not all the psychologists they did not agree entirely to it. They said that this is not the case. Some psychologists who are known by the name of humanistic psychologists, they argued that it is not the absolute reason that determines a human behavior. I mean, Sigmund Freud said that whatever behavior we do, or if we are suffering from any kind of mental disorder, any kind of depression, anxiety, the reason lies in our unconscious mind, which is related to sexual thoughts and aggressive thoughts. But humanistic psychologists said that this is not the case. People, they have a free will, they desire to think freely, and they are strongly motivated by future plans and goals and by the desire for their personal growth. Now, just take this example that when a person has got a goal that person is going to achieve very high marks in a school or college, or that person is preparing for a job, how will you tell that the person is actually preparing for that job and he or she is very much determined to get that job? Just by noticing his behavior. Now, this is like absolutely a cause and effect thing. Like he has got the cause of applying for the job and actually getting that job, and that effect would be the behavior changes. The behavior changes would be you'll see that person studying, devoting his time to the study, and that's why he is motivated. Now what motivates him? His future plans, his future goals motivates him. He knows that if he gets that job his life will change, so that's why his behavior is determined in that way. He has stopped going to the parties and he doesn't waste his time. He sits to study for long hours, so that's how the behavior is affected. And that's how he has got that desire for personal growth. Next is the ultimate challenge to behaviorism, and the narrow definition of psychology came from cognitive revolution. What this cognitive revolution is all about? It is a renewal of interest in all aspects of the cognition. This revolution had been brewing for some time, as psychologists they quietly went about studying memory, reasoning, problem solving, and other cognitive processes. But by the 1960s, the development of computers it aided much more in the research. So when with the advent of computers, now the psychologists, now the researchers, they were able to gain an access into much more things. Like for example, computers made it possible to expose individuals to specific stimuli in a very precise manner and to measure the speed of reactions. So they could perform all these experiments with their clients just because of the computers, just because of the advent or the development of computers, soon followed by the techniques to observe the mental activities of fully awake people as they perform various cognitive tasks. So they could do this as well. They could observe the mental activities of a fully awake person like you and me. We are now fully awake, and they could do this thing by using the computer's technology, and they gave those persons in the study, in the experiment, few cognitive tasks, and they actually observed their mental activities or their brain activities. So as you can see from the questions of what human mind is, we have already reached the stage where psychologists they used computers, they used the knowledge of computers in their study, and that's why modern psychology truly is the science of behavior and cognitive processes, because it studies all the aspects of human behavior, what we think, what we feel, what we experience, what we do in different situations. In the middle of 20th century, a major shift took place. The realizations that humans are cultural beings and science is also a socially embedded activity have led to the adoption of newer methods and conceptual models in psychology. That's why I said you in the beginning of this video that socio-cultural context is significant in shaping psychological functioning and the discipline, and today's psychology is an enterprise with plurality, multivocally, avoiding ethnocentrism and androcentrism, in which you are like not focusing on just one ethnic culture, or you are not doing that biasness thing in which you are like preferring a particular culture for your own theory. Like when you're making any experiment, you are making any study, you are just observing a single culture and you're trying to generalize your views, generalize the result of that particular experiment to other cultures as well. So that is ethnocentrism. And androcentrism is like earlier it used to happen, like most of the theories in the subject of psychology, it was made keeping in mind the behavior, mental thoughts of males. Like men were the main priority, so that's why androcentrism. So today's psychology is not like that. It is an enterprise with plurality and multivocality. So we are trying to avoid all these biases and we are trying to make a proper definition and proper explanations about each phenomena as much as possible. Next topic tells us about some milestone in the history of psychology. In the year 1879, Wundt establishes the first lab of psychology. In the year 1890, William James publishes the Principles of Psychology. In the year 1892, G. Stanley Hall founds the American Psychological Association. In the year 1904, Pavlov studies conditioning. 1905, Mary Calkins elected the first women president of American Psychological Association. In the year 1913, Watson publishes Call for Behaviorism. 1933, Freud publishes influential new introductory lectures on psychoanalysis. 1951, Carl Rogers helped start humanistic movement. 1953, B.F. Skinner publishes Science and Human Behavior, Radical Behaviorism. And 1968, Atkinson and Shiffrin publish influential model of memory, start of cognitive revolution, which we have already talked about. 1980s to 1990s, there were techniques for imaging activities in the brain of awake individuals. So all these developed during these period. Try to remember the dates. It is important in the history of psychology, like it is some of the milestones in the history of psychology. Next topic is psychology in India, ancient roots and modern developments. When I talk about India, India has got a strong and variegated tradition of reflective scholarship with rich insights into human psyche and behavior much before the advent of modern scientific psychology. This line means that India has been interested in the study of the science of psychology, the science in which we use introspection, the science in which we reflect our own thoughts, behavior, and actions much before than the advent of modern scientific psychology. So that's why impressive experience based accounts had been found from our ancient texts, like for self realization, and all those things were made in order to alleviate suffering. The Vedic and Upanishadic knowledge, it argues for human identity as a form of impersonal and pervading reality. It says that human identity is very impersonal. It is not related to oneself, but it just emerges from the reality. Tries to it tries to mix with the reality, and hence it is formed. And the different Indian thought systems like the Vedanta, Mimamsa, Samakhya, etc., which has been mentioned, they are quite diverse in their orientation. So all these, they have tried to explain about the human mind, about the self analysis they have given, but they are quite diverse in their views. But still, we Indians, we are much more aware, and that too much earlier. We are aware about this knowledge discipline of psychology. And when talking about the official introduction of psychology in India, it happened in the year of 1916 when psychology was introduced as a discipline at master's level at Calcutta University. Dr. N.N. Sengupta, a Harvard trained scholar, was appointed as the first faculty, and in the year 1920 he moved to Lucknow, authored Introduction to Social Psychology with Radha Kamal Mukherjee. And also the Indian Psychological Association was formed in the year of 1925. Remember this. And they published their own journal known as the Indian Journal of Psychology in 1926. They started this journal. Who? The Indian Psychological Association. The first doctorate in psychology was awarded to Girindra Shekhar Bose at Calcutta in the year of 1922 on his work on repression. Okay, in the upcoming chapters, you'll know what repression is. So let's move on to the next point. And Bose, he also founded the Indian Psychoanalytical Society in the year of 1922, and he started his journal Samiksha in the year of 1947. So when I say that Psychoanalytical Society he started, Bose was communicating with Freud, Sigmund Freud, who had appreciated his work. I mean, Sigmund Freud, he appreciated Bose's work, and however he differed from Freud on many issues, and but still he was affiliated to the International Psychoanalytical Association in the year of 1922, and he started teaching at Calcutta University in the year 1917, and he's also a very famous psychologist of India. And as I said, he started the journal Samiksha in the year of 1947. And when psychology came to India, it slowly it progressed, and slowly many psychologists, they took interest in the subject, many students took interest in the subject, and gradually there were more studies of prejudices, social influence, poverty and deprivation, education, environment, health, gender and values. And in the year 1960s, the teaching programs of psychology, they were separated from philosophy department. So earlier it was merged with the philosophy department, and psychology did not have its own department in the universities, but in the year 1960s, during the period of 1960s, it was separated from the philosophy department. So as we already know that the socio-cultural context was receiving greater attention. So there were many changes and many criticisms were faced by all these theories and whatever all these emerging psychologists were giving views on. There were many changes, many people were agreeing, many people were not agreeing to it. And throughout all those changes, now slowly what has happened is that now the discipline is becoming local. I mean, both global as well as local things are given importance to by responding to the aspects of local reality, and it is also having the concerns which is in the global level. So we are taking into account both the things, whatever is happening globally and whatever is happening locally. By merging both of them, we are trying to define a theory, we are trying to explain, and then we are able to generalize. So it is about today's psychology, what is being said. So that's all for this video.